Hi readers, how are you today? I have got quite a story for you guys this afternoon. Today's is a story about pirates and about books and about the power of our imagination and getting lost in a good book. So here's the story of Edward and the Pirates. This is written and illustrated by David McPhail. You've probably read some of his books before. He's a really wonderful author. If you haven't read him, check him out. So Edward and the Pirates. Once Edward learned to read, there was no stopping him. Cereal boxes at the breakfast table. I'm curious how many of you do that. Do you read the message on the back of the box or check out the ingredients? Seed catalogs that arrived on the coldest day of winter, the inscription on the monument in the town square, and books. All kinds of books. The word that I'm thinking of for Edward is this word voracious. Voracious means like you'll read anything you can. Doesn't mean just reading, but like if you have a voracious appetite, you'll eat and eat and eat, like anything that people try out there. Oh, try this. Oh, try that. Like that's voracious. He sounds like a voracious reader, that he's reading so many different types of things kind of wherever he goes. Edward especially liked stories of adventure. When he read about Admiral Peary racing by dog sled to the North Pole, Edward was right alongside, comforting the brave dogs and urging them on. When he read about the bold outlaw Robin Hood, he was surrounded by the evil sheriff of Nottingham's men. It was Edward who came to the rescue. And when he read about Joan of Arc leading her troops to victory, it was Edward who carried her shield and held it up just in time to deflect the blow of the battle axe. Sometimes what Edward read seemed to become real. Once he was reading a book about dinosaurs, and he was convinced he'd seen a Tyrannosaurus looking in his window. Edward strikes me as the type of reader who can really get lost in a book. You know, if you just like, you're in a good spot, you're just sort of fully absorbing what's going on in your book. He really seems like he's getting lost in his books. I'm making a connection to that because I've noticed that since being home, I've been reading a lot more and that I have been getting lost in my books more where I like don't want to put it down, don't want to put it down. Has that happened to any of you guys? Next to home, the library was Edward's favorite place. He had his own library card and he could borrow all the books he could carry. One day, Edward found a book lying on a shelf behind some other books. The book was old and covered with dust. Edward blew away the dust and read the title, Lost Pirate Treasure. He sat down and began to read. Some pirate treasure has never been found. Edward was still reading when he felt someone tap him on the shoulder. It was Mr. Torres, the librarian. Time to go, Edward, he said. The library will be closing soon. Edward checked out the book and walked home, arriving just in time for supper. Oh, you know what I didn't notice before? The pirate coming alive out of the bookshelf for him. Oh, and look at, I see one here too. I didn't notice that either. These illustrations are a little bit dark, but it seems like as Edward reads, the characters or the people that are sort of like connected to his stories are kind of coming to life for him, creeping in on him. That night, Edward went to bed early, taking his book with him. When the pirate ship was being tossed about on the stormy seas, it was Edward who bravely took the helm. The helm is like the steering wheel. Sometime in the night, Edward felt his bed being bumped. I have a really cool drawing with that water coming over the side of his bed. Edward sat up and looked around and saw he was surrounded by pirates. "What are you pirates doing in my room?" he demanded. "We've come for the book," answered the pirate who seemed to be the leader. "We think it tells where our treasure is buried." "I can't give it to you," Edward explained. "It's checked out on my library card. You'll have to wait until I return it." The pirates begged, but Edward wouldn't change his mind. They pleaded, but Edward folded his arms around the book and shook his head no. They even promised him a share of the treasure, but that didn't work either. "You'll have to walk the plank," threatened the pirates, but Edward stood firm. Finally, one of the pirates drew his sword and waved it over Edward's head. "Hand it over," he roared, but Edward wouldn't budge. "Better be quiet," he warned the pirates, "or you'll wake up my mom and dad." He's a pretty brave guy. I know for me, sometimes if I'm reading a book, right, because we know this is kind of like his imagination happening here, but I know that if I read a book that's a little bit scary or has maybe some like not kind characters like these pirates, um, I get like sometimes it's hard for me to read scary books. I get like my imagination kind of goes away and I think it's too real. But I love that Edward is like so calm. He's like, "Better be quiet or you're gonna wake my mom and dad." And he's like not budging. He's not giving in. I like how confident he is. Edward had just finished speaking when the door to his room burst open and someone riding a huge white horse charged in. It was Edward's mother. She was dressed in a shining suit of armor and was carrying a lance. She pinned the sword-waving pirate to the wall, but then the other pirates drew their swords and closed in for the attack. Let me finish reading my story. I'm reading the story to the kids. I'll read it to you. You can listen. Suddenly, a flurry of arrows flew through the air, knocking all the swords away. A figure dressed in a green tunic bounded into the room, bow drawn, arrows at the ready. It was Edward's father. "Back off," he commanded the pirates. "Go stand in the corner." The pirates did as they were told. "Don't hurt us," they begged. Who does his father look like he's dressed like? He's reminding me of Robin Hood. When Edward was reading about Robin Hood, and his mom was reminding me a bit of Joan of Arc on that page. Edward felt sorry for the pirates. "They only came for this book," he explained to his mother and father. "I don't think they meant any harm." Edward handed the book to the pirates. The head pirate held it open while the others huddled close by, talking in whispers. After a few minutes, the pirate gave the book back to Edward. "It's of no use to us," he said sadly. "We can't read." "You can't read?" asked Edward. "Not one word," answered the pirates. "None of us can." "I'll read it to you then," said Edward. "That is, if it's all right with my mom and dad." It was. "But don't stay up too late," Edward's mother told him firmly. "And close the window when you leave," said Edward's father to the pirates. As his mother and father left the room and went back to bed, Edward opened the book and began to read aloud. "Some pirate treasure has never been found." Well, readers, that is the story of Edward and the Pirates. I just love that adventure, and I love that. I think to me, I would say the message or the moral of the story is about the power of our imagination and the joy that we can find when we get lost in a good book. So I hope that today you will find yourself, or if not today, I know today we're working with poetry, but you will find yourself soon lost in a good book and enjoying yourself. All right, I'll see you soon.